Why do herbs sometimes not work? Is it the wrong dosage, the wrong timing, the wrong remedy? And if it is the wrong remedy, what leads people to choose the wrong one? Typically, this means they missed some vitally important piece of information during the intake, some critical piece of information that can make a difference between the right remedy and the wrong one. And that main thing is the constitutional pattern within the afflicted tissue itself. But what the heck does that even mean? Stay tuned to find out, where in this episode of The Plant Path, I'm going to be talking about the importance of your intake and 5 key distinctions, questions that you have to make sure you ask every person that you're working with. Welcome back to The Plant Path, everybody. I'm your host, Sajah Popham, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism and Natura Sophia Spagyrics. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me here and to further your education in the art and practice of herbal medicine and on your plant path. And real quick, before I dig into the main content, I just want to make a minor request, a quick little thing here to like and subscribe. It really does help support the channel. So if you don't mind making sure you're subbed to the podcast, to the YouTube channel, that you like the video, you share it with someone, it really does help support our work and being able to continue publishing free content for the herbal community. The wrong remedy. What is the result of choosing the wrong herbal remedy for someone? Well, I would say at best, the remedy does nothing and it just doesn't work. And the person really is right back to where they started. At worst, it makes their condition worse, right? Their headache just went from a level 6 to a level 8, right? So why do people accidentally choose the wrong remedy? Well, obviously it's not on purpose, but usually it's due to some sort of mistake. And oftentimes this mistake begins in our perceptual orientation. From a vitalist perspective of herbal medicine, we want to avoid thinking in terms of what herbs are, quote, good for, right? We want to try to distance ourselves from an excessively allopathic way of thinking about an herb, right? That feverfew is the migraine remedy and turmeric is the inflammation remedy. That type of thinking tends to pigeonhole herbs and very often leads to a lack of precision and specificity in your remedy selection. But if you want to be specific and precise in your remedy selection, you have to be specific and precise in your assessment of the person, in your consultation. There's specific pieces of information that are crucial for you to get in order to be precise in the selection of the herbs that you give to that person. And what I want to talk about here specifically is the determination of the tissue state, right? 5 questions that you can, or 5 observations, we'll say, that you can make to decipher the energetics of the condition that you're treating, right? Because if you're going to make use of the energetic properties of an herb, you have to know the energetics of the person, right? Because without it, it's that information about the plants is useless, right? So in order to do this, you've got to really put your investigative hat on. You have to turn into part investigative reporter, police interrogator, and friendly, kind, loving healer, all at the same time. Meaning you got to know what questions to ask, how to ask them kind of in a multitude of different ways, what to look and listen for so that you can be guided to determining the contributing root causes of that person's problem. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this one, going in depth on how to assess tissue states in the people that you're working with. And if you enjoy this content and you want to go in more depth and learn much more about the Vitalist tradition of working with people and plants, of which energetics is a critical part, then I want to make sure that you know next week, that is June 15th on Monday, we are going to be opening up free enrollment in our Vitalist Herbalism mini course. This is an in-depth 3-part workshop series where we're going to be going into a lot more detail on how to understand people and plants in accordance with the vital intelligence of nature. So the waiting list is open now. If you head over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, you can sign up for the waiting list, be at the front of the line to get into the first workshop that starts next Monday. So be sure to check it out. This only happens once a year, and we're super excited to be sharing that with you. So with that, let's get back to the primary observations for assessing tissue states. Okay, so before I get into these 5 observations, I need to do a quick little discussion on energetics, because I've said that word a few times and some people might be like, what the heck are you talking about? So energetics here is not, in the context of herbal medicine, when we say energetics, we're not talking about some esoteric concept. We're not talking about the spirit of the plant or the spiritual life of the person. We're talking about something very pragmatic, very physical, very practical. We're talking about what is the ecological state of the tissue, right? The habitat of the tissue that gives rise to specific symptomatic patterns, okay? So this is the way traditional physicians really understood the body. It wasn't through this modern biomedical, reductionistic, chemical-based pattern. It was holistic. It was an understanding that the human being is a microcosm of the macrocosm, that nature is inside of us, right? And that there's layers to the way nature is present within our body. We have our constitution as a whole, as well as specific, I like to think of it as different ecosystems in the body, different systems, different organs, different tissues that exist in a particular environmental context. And when we think of nature and we think of studying, the qualities and characteristics of, say, natural habitats, weather, ecosystems, the seasons, right? We can really distill it down into 3 major categories. We've got the temperature, hot or cold. We've got moisture, damp or dry. And then we have the tone, the tonal quality of the tissue, whether it's tense or whether it's relaxed. Knowing this information about the specific pattern in your client then helps you determine the right remedy that matches their pattern antipathetically, meaning using opposites to balance. So if someone's got really dry lungs, you want to give them moistening respiratory herbs. If they've got cold digestion, you want to warm up their digestive system. If they have tension in the uterus, then you want to relax her uterus, right? So this is the principle of antipathy, and most herbal traditions use that model, whether you're talking Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Tibetan medicine, Unani Tib, Galenic Greek medicine, a vast majority of folk traditions, they use opposites to balance. Okay, so that's energetics. Hot, cold, damp, dry, tense, relaxed. These are the things that you need to figure out when you're working with a person. So it's not enough to just know that they have a headache. It's not enough to know that they have a cough. It's not enough to know that they have a urinary tract infection. These things are useful. It's a starting point, but you have to get way more detailed information. So what I want to share with you is the 5 main observations that I typically consider when I'm trying to decipher the energetics of the tissue state, right? I had an instructor, a professor, when I was at Bastyr, who said, the issue's in the tissue. The issue is in the tissue. And at the time, I was like, well, I mean, it kind of seems like a no-brainer. But after reflection of it, it's like, oh, there's actually something really deep to that statement, which is you need to assess the specific state of the tissue, of the organ, of the system, to determine the right remedy. If you don't do that, you are highly likely to choose the wrong remedy, okay? So let's dig into these. But first, these observations really rest within a broader framework of doing a good intake with people. That is a very common method of intake. I originally learned it from Paul Bergner, but he certainly didn't invent it either. And that is an acronym, OPQRST. Now, I don't have time to go into everything involved with OPQRST very quickly. That acronym stands for onset, provoke or palliate, quality, radiate, severity, and timing. And this is a framework of questions that you ask about each symptom someone has. So I'm just mentioning here that these 5 observations fall oftentimes somewhere within this framework, and these types of observations or questions typically arise as I'm going through the intake process. So the first one I want to talk about here is the Q. Quality, the quality of the symptom. So again, it's not enough to know the symptom, the condition, the name of the disease. We have to get much more specific about as to how the unique individual is uniquely expressing that pattern, that pathological pattern, right? There are, of course, some conditions, some diseases that are by their very nature embody a very specific kind of tissue state pattern, right? Like hyperthyroidism. Hyperthyroid typically has like a pretty distinct heat pattern, a pattern of overstimulation, whereas hypothyroid typically has a pretty distinct cold or depressed type tissue state pattern to it. So that's usually pretty reliable, but nonetheless, you still want to get the more from the person how they are uniquely expressing that. So typically this involves asking questions that help guide the client to describing the way in which their symptoms feel uniquely within their own body. And, you know, it's not uncommon for people to have a hard time describing what they feel. So oftentimes we can ask clarifying questions that will help them to find the words. So again, not just I have a cough and here's some random expectorants, but what is the specific quality of the cough? So if someone comes to me and they got a cough, I'm going to ask them questions like, okay, when you cough, do you cough anything up? Right? Are you able to expectorate anything from your lungs? If they answer no, that gives me a lot of information. Usually that's going to be more indicative of a drier type cough. If they say, yes, I am able to expectorate some material. Okay, well, now we're going to dig into that a little bit. Okay, what's the quality of that expectorated material, right? Is it kind of thick and hardened? Is it green, yellow, brown? Is it clear? Is it thin, thick? Is it copious? Is it just a little bit? Is it kind of ropey? What's the consistency? These types of things help to clarify. Okay, how does it feel in your chest? Does your chest feel kind of tight and constricted? Or say when you take a deep breath, does it kind of tickle in your throat and your lungs? Does it kind of irritate? And then, if you take too deep a breath, is it going to make you start coughing a lot? Do you have ticklish sensations? Does it tend to get worse at nighttime? Say when you lay down to go to sleep? Is it difficult to inhale or exhale? Does it feel, when you cough, what's the sound of the cough, right? This is a really good one for quality. Is it kind of hollow, echoey, dry sound, wheezy sounding, or does it sound like gurgly and thick and bubbly, right? So these are the kind of questions that help you determine, is this like leaning more towards hot? Is it leaning more towards cold? Is it leaning more towards damp? Is it leaning more towards dry? Now, in this specific example, and I think this goes true for really any mucosal membrane organ system, which would be respiratory, urinary, and digestive systems. Delineating damp and dry is super important. If someone's got a dry cough and you give them really drying herbs, it's going to really agitate that cough, right? If someone has a really sharp, hot, burning, scalding urine with a UTI, and you give them really spicy, pungent diuretic like juniper, it's going to really irritate that symptom. So this is why the energetics is really, really important. And oftentimes the Q part of OPQRST is a time when you ask questions to decipher the quality, okay? Now, this is also very important when we're assessing pain. So a lot of people make the mistake of only doing the S part when they're addressing pain, right? S being severity. The way a lot of people do this is, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being it's mildly annoying, to 10 being I'm debilitated, I'm in excruciating pain, where do you land? That's, a lot of people just do that with pain. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is your pain? Now, that's, some folks might say that's not even a relevant question to ask. I actually do think it's relevant, and I'll tell you why. It's because that helps you track the progression over time of the case. So if they come in and they're at a level 8 pain, and then upon reassessment, say in a month, they say they're at a level 5. But then at the same time, they say, yeah, I'm still, in pain. It hasn't helped. Your herbs aren't working, right? Which is not an uncommon thing people say. And that's typically because, like, well, how did you feel a month ago? What scale of pain were you at a month ago? It's kind of hard to remember. It's even hard to remember 2 weeks ago. Luckily, we have this built-in amnesia for our suffering. But that can be something that you can reflect back. Oh, well, when you first came in, you said you were at a level 8 pain, and now you're saying at a level 5 pain. It seems like you have improvement. And then they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, I guess maybe you're right. Yeah, maybe it is a little bit better, right? It's like, well, they already said it was better. So that's why severity scoring, I think, is important. Timing scoring is also very important because maybe they're still at level 8 pain, but instead of 2 headaches a week, they're down to 1 headache every 2 weeks. It's still a level 8 headache, but the frequency or the timing has changed. So, but with pain, the quality of the pain is very important to assess because that's going to point towards different kinds of herbs. It also gives insight into what might be causing the pain, right? Is the pain from inflammation? Is it from stagnant blood? Is it from swelling? Is it from spasm? Is it nerve pain? These are all important delineators that will really change what remedies you choose, right? Because if someone has, say really bad, damp, stagnant kind of pain, and you give them St. John's wort, which is really specific for nerve pain, it's probably not going to help that much, right? Conversely, if someone has nerve pain and you give them herbs that tend to be anodyne because they drain dampness, it's probably not going to work that well. So questions to qualify the nature of the pain. Is it dull? Is it achy? Is it throbbing? Is it burning? Is it tingling? Is there numbness? Does it feel really tense? and tight? Or does it feel kind of like it's dropping, like it's like things feel like they don't have a lot of good tone to it? Where is the pain? This is something with headaches. Is it occipital? Is it temporal? Is it frontal? Is it vertex? These types of things can be very helpful in clarifying, especially, headache pain. This is really important for any kind of pain, but especially for headache pain. Man, if you get it wrong, if someone's got a hot headache and you give them rosemary, they are not going to be very happy with you, right? So what you're doing here under quality is you're asking questions to help understand the qualities and characteristics of heat versus cold, damp versus dry, and tension versus relaxation. And oftentimes there'll be combinations. So there can be heat with dampness and relaxation. There can be heat with dryness and tension. There can be cold with dampness. There can be cold with dryness and tension, right? So you get these, it's not just one or the other. It's like temperature, moisture, tone. Try to figure out what's going on there and derive questioning based on the location of that symptom to determine those types of things. Okay, observation number 2 is aggravation and palliation, or provocation and palliation. This is the P part of OPQRST, excuse me. And this is typically a series of questions around what makes their symptom better or worse. So continuing with, say, our headache example, a simple question that can be crucial, again, with that temperature differential of the headache would be, does your headache feel better with an ice pack or a hot pad, right? Does your headache get worse when the weather's really hot and you're outside in the heat of the sun, you get a headache? Or is your headache worse when you go out in the cold, or you eat really cold food or eat really hot, spicy food, right? These types of things. What makes it better? What makes it worse? And usually with headaches, people know. Any kind of musculoskeletal pain, usually people know too, oh, hot pack really makes it feel better. Or, oh no, hot makes it way worse. Only ice for me. So palliate, provoke. This is a very important distinguishing characteristic. This can be a variety of factors. And sometimes it's just asking them, like, have you noticed anything that makes it better or anything that makes it worse? Sometimes pressure can be an indicator, especially with pain. So does the pain feel better when you kind of hold it? You want to push down on it, or you don't want to touch it at all, right? Sometimes people get headaches and they want to kind of hold it in, right? And other times they want to give it space. This can usually be a pattern of excess versus deficiency. So oftentimes things where you don't want to touch it, it's more of an excess, whereas pressing on it feels better. It's a little bit more of a sign of deficiency. So that can be a good characteristic there. Another way you can qualify provocation and palliation would be if they've taken anything and it helps. So maybe someone has, headaches and they're like, oh yeah, I find, if I drink some ginger tea, that usually actually makes my headaches feel a little bit better. Okay, what's the nature of ginger? It's a hot, dry, circulatory stimulant remedy, right? So if ginger or rosemary or something makes someone's headache better, you can pretty much assume that it's a cold deficient type headache, right? That we want to move blood up into the head, right? So, and guess what? If I'm giving that person a formula for their headaches, guess what's going to be in their formula? I'm going to put some ginger in there. Like, they literally told me something that already works. I'm probably going to give it to them, right? So, and that can even be, that can sometimes even be applicable with over-the-counter remedies. So if, say, for example, there's someone with really bad menstrual cramps, and say she takes, if she were to say, oh, when I have menstrual cramps, if I take an aspirin, it usually really helps. Okay, well, what's the nature of aspirin, right? It's an anti-inflammatory, right? It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, an NSAID. Or I heard the joke one time, NSAID, new sorts of aspirin in disguise. I thought that was pretty good. But guess what? She's got that pain is, inflammation is going to be a key component of her pain. I want to make sure that I'm giving some herbs that are going to address the inflammatory side. And it's going to make me want to really investigate, well, why is she inflamed, right? Is she eating a food she's intolerant to? Does she have other signs of inflammation systemically or in other organ systems, right? So provoke and palliate, you can get a lot of really interesting insights just by talking about that with people. Observation number 3 would be, this is part of timing. So this is part of the T part of OPQRST. And specifically here, I'm referring to like seasons and weather or in more environmental type exposure. Okay. So this can also fit under palliate and provoke, because sometimes seasonal stuff or weather stuff will come up in palliate, provoke. They're like, oh yeah, it gets way worse when it's really hot outside in the summer. Or, oh yeah, it's way better in the winter. So sometimes this stuff will come up under P, but I tend to think of it under T for timing. So, right, is it better or worse in specific weather patterns, or during certain seasons, or when you're exposed to certain maybe extremes of temperature or extremes of moisture or lack thereof? We spend some time down in the Southwest from time to time, and I've noticed certain issues start to arise within me when I'm in the dry heat of the desert that I don't experience here in Pacific Northwest, where it's pretty much cold and damp all the time. When I get in that dry heat, certain things come up for me where I'm like, wow, that really aggravates some things with my body. So I know now when I go to the Southwest, there's a few things that I can do to help balance the energetics again of the tissue so those problems don't arise. So weather and seasons. So typically this would be, we're really looking at the extremes of summer and winter, because those are extremes in temperature differential. If there's rainy seasons, oftentimes that can be insightful. An example of that actually here in the Pacific Northwest, where it rains a lot, if people have damp type arthritis or joint pain, oftentimes their joint pain will flare up in the autumn when it gets really rainy here, right? I mean, cloudy, rainy all the time, and people's joint pain will really flare up, or they can almost, they can almost be predictive of when it's going to rain. So they'll be like, oh, yeah, joint pain's getting worse. I'm swelling up. It's going to rain. And sure enough, it'll start raining. So, because our environment, again, our body is a microcosm. Our environment affects our health. It affects our constitution. It affects our tissue states. And so by asking questions around that, sometimes nothing comes up here, and that's okay. But sometimes important things do come up that can be really key distinguishing factors for deciphering the tissue state of the afflicted organ system. Okay, fourth here would be observation of general constitutional patterns, right? So this is kind of taking, rather than zooming in on the tissue state energetics of the organs, we got to zoom out and just look at the body as a whole. Look at the person's overall tendencies and dispositions based on their constitution. Now, it's very important to understand that people can have one particular constitution and they can manifest symptoms that are of a different nature of that constitution, right? Maybe they've got a cold, dry, tense, what we would say Vata type constitution, but they've got a damp heat pattern, right? That can happen. Now, typically, that damp heat pattern in a cold, dry, tense Vata type person is a lot easier to treat than a cold, dry, tense Vata type person with a cold, dry, tense issue, because the constitution is reinforcing the symptomatic pattern, right? That's a little deeper, a little harder to treat. But it is important to understand that just knowing someone's constitution doesn't necessarily mean all their problems are going to be of that constitutional nature. But it does, knowing the constitution just gives you insights into the likelihood or tendency towards specific energetic patterns in the body. So you can do this using a variety of constitutional systems, whether that's, the four humors of the Greek Galenic model, which is also used in Unani Tib, whether you're using Ayurvedic Tridosha system, whether you're using the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, whether you're using the planetary qualities of medical astrology, whatever system you use, they all basically say the same thing, just different languages or different numbers of constitutions, which therefore give you varying levels of specificity, right? Like a 7-planet model is much more specific than a 3-dosha model because you've got 7 instead of 3. So whatever system you like, just use that. Someone with and all of these constitutional systems have their specific manifestations of temperature, moisture, and tone. So, for example, someone with a Vata constitution, like I said, will be more prone to cold, to dryness, and to tension. Okay? A Pitta person will be much more likely to be hot, damp, especially in the form of oils, and stimulated. Kapha will tend to be more cold, moist, and relaxed. There's a total of 20 qualities in Ayurveda. So there's things like light and heavy and mobile and inert. And so there's lots of other qualities, but these are kind of the main, temperature, moisture, tone qualities that we see in those doshas. So pick your constitutional system and then from there, get to know it and utilize it. So again, on the note I made earlier, excuse me, if you have, say, a Kapha type person, right, that typically Kapha is going to be cold, they're going to be damp, they're going to be phlegmatic, they're going to be heavy, they're going to be more relaxed in their tissue state, they can still get a hot, dry cough, right? Now, if you have a Kapha constitution with a hot, dry cough, here's the thing. This is a mistake a lot of people make, and I get this question all the time. Oh, they have a hot, dry cough. Well, I don't want to give them a cold, moistening remedy because it's going to aggravate their constitution. No. That's a mistake. This differentiation is actually outlined in Ayurvedic medicine, where you have your Prakruti, your core constitutional pattern, and then you have your Vikruti, your assumed constitutional pattern, or what we might say is the constitution of the disease. You always treat the Vikruti. You always treat the imbalance. So it doesn't matter that kapha is cold, damp, and relaxed. If they've got a hot, dry cough, give them a cooling, moistening herb for their lungs. Correct the tissue state, right? Now, that said, if you know that this person is kapha, it's important to understand that they might have a greater predisposition towards having cold, damp, relaxed patterns, right? And that can give you insight. So what do we look at when we're assessing the constitution? It's really everything. You're looking at the overall body composition, the shape of the body as a whole, the shape of the head, the limbs, the extremities, fingers. You're looking at the quality of the skin, right? Is it dry? Is it cold? Is it warm? Is it oily? Is it kind of clammy? What's the tone of their voice? What's their hair like? Is it really thin and wiry? Is it lush and oily and thick? Are their earlobes big? Is their nose bulbous? Do they have plump, thick lips? Is their chin really pointed, or does it have a broad jawline? The nature of the eyebrows, the eyes, the nails, all of it point towards the constitution, right? You can literally observe every minuscule detail about a person, and ultimately all of that kind of assembles into a generalized pattern. And the other part of this, so those are all observational aspects. The other piece that helps reinforce an understanding of the Constitution would be their medical history. And I do think as an herbalist, it's your duty to do a very good, in-depth medical history, from the moment of birth up until now. I want to know everything. I want to know their hospitalizations. I want to know how many antibiotics they've taken. I want to know how many times they've gotten sick. I want to know how they get sick. I want to know everything. I want to know drugs they've had to take, both illicit and medical. I want to, their lifestyle, all of it. Because all of that helps reinforce an understanding of the Constitution. Okay, so that's number 4. Number 5, our fifth and final observation to determine the tissue state. This is one of my favorites, and that is assessing the tongue. Okay. That might sound weird for some of you. The tongue is a critically important area of assessment when we're doing holistic evaluation. In fact, it's so important, I'm planning on doing a whole other upcoming post on tongue assessment because I think it really deserves a little bit more of a focus time. It's very involved. There's a lot to it. But what I will say is that simple tongue assessment can be relatively straightforward and logical, and a very useful way of helping clarify the general tissue status of the body. Real quick, the tongue is seen as a microcosm of the whole body. So in the same way that we as a whole human are a microcosm of all of nature, we can scale that down and say the tongue is like a microcosm of the entire body. It's a map. And the whole body is mapped out on the tongue, starting at the top of the head, the center, at the tip of the tongue, going all the way down and ending with the kidneys at the back of the tongue. All the inner organs can be observed on the tongue. And these simple energetic assessments can be achieved just by looking at the tongue, even without even knowing all the organ specifics. This can be very straightforward, right? What does someone look like when they're really hot? Right? They tend to have more redness. So if you see a really red tongue, it's going to point towards heat. What happens when you have a lot of dampness in the body? You get swellings, right? Things swell with fluids. Well, if you look at the tongue and it's really wet and you see streamers down the sides and it looks puffy and swollen, it's got scallops along the edges, you can bet that there's dampness in the body. They stick their tongue out and it's all withered and dried and cracked and it doesn't look like there's any moisture on it at all. You can bet that there's dryness in the system. So there's a lot of ways that are very simple and very intuitive to assess the tongue that helps reinforce your understanding of the underlying tissue state. I think every herbal practitioner should just look at people's tongues. I think you should look at your own tongue every day. Before you brush it, before you scrape it, just look at it. You know your body, you know what's going on. Just look at it and get a sense for the state of the tongue. So I'll leave it at that for now. Be sure to stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe. If you're watching anywhere other than our email list or than our website, head over to evolutionaryherbalism.com and get on our email list so you can make sure to be notified when we release our next episode. I think it'll be the next one, but I'm going to do a deeper dive on tongue assessment. So be sure to check that out. The only way you'll know it comes out is if you subscribe and get on our email list. So in closing, I just want to say that energetics is really it's common sense. I think people can kind of overcomplicate energetics. It can make it way too, like they get too overwhelmed and too confused by it. I think it's very important to understand that we practice energetics all the time. You go out in a cold, snowy day, you come in, what do you want? Do you want a salad or do you want a hot bowl of soup? When you're cold, you warm up. When you're warm, you cool off. You know what a hot person looks like, not like in terms of attractiveness, but in terms of like literally the temperature looks hot, right? You know what someone that's really cold looks like. This is, you're using your senses. I think there's something hardwired into the human condition that allows us to sense and understand energetics. I think we intuitively sense how the outer world affects the inner world, and we're observing it daily in the weather, in the seasons, in our environment. So in that way, excuse me, to me, the best way to learn energetics isn't necessarily studying it in books. It is to do what I always say, which is to first, foremost, and forever be a student of nature. To go outside and to observe the qualities of temperature, moisture, and tone in the natural world. To observe how environments, weather, and ecosystems and seasons affect your own body and your own health. This is the language of the elements, that these energetic qualities ultimately emerge from the elements, depending on your philosophy, right? Aristotle had some different things to say about it, but I don't really ascribe to the Aristotelian, I don't ever know how to say it, Aristotelian philosophy, which says hot, cold, damp, and dry were first, and the elements emerged from that. I think it's reversed. I think fire, earth, air, and water emerged first in the creation of creation, and those qualities emerged from the manifestation of those elements. But my point is that studying those elements gives you a lot of insight into the nature of energetics, pathology, how pathological patterns manifest energetically and how you can directly observe it in the body. It also teaches you about how to observe the energetics of herbs. If you have an herb that tastes hot, aromatic, pungent, warming, it moves up and out, it's a very fiery quality, I'll bet it's going to be hot and it's going to be dry, because fire warms things up and dries them out. So I encourage you to acquaint yourself closely with the elements of nature, with your environment, with your habitat, with the turning of the seasons. Study energetics in this way. And you can, of course, read the Greeks, read the Ayurvedic texts, take some herbs and experience it for yourself that way too. And in that way, you can balance your intellectual knowledge with an experiential understanding. And those come together with discipline and consistency and practice. And I think ultimately will blossom into wisdom. So thank you very much for making it to the end of this episode of The Plant Path. I do truly appreciate it. Again, like, subscribe, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com, join our email list so you can get all the notifications, all the updates when we're running free workshops or when we are opening enrollment for a course. If you want to take your studies deeper, be sure to get on our email list so you can be in the know. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And until the next one, take care and be well.